We are into the final 8 of the Champions League, and the draw spat out not just some incredibly well-balanced ties, but the bracket itself is pretty even as well. On one side, your path to the final has Borussia Dortmund versus Atletico Madrid and Barcelona versus PSG. On the other side, Bayern taking on Arsenal and Real Madrid in another rematch against Manchester City. These guys face off once per year at this point. It's tradition. Of course, we'll set up all of these matches for you, looking at how we got here, the shared history of these two sides, and various points that must be considered when speaking of these teams against each other. Hey, I'm Adrian, and this is Rabona TV. Thanks for joining me, and yes, I will add in the team that I think will advance for each matchup as well. Just a guess, you know? But before we do so, we got to thank our sponsors for this video, BetterHelp. Now, as you guys know, I've been using BetterHelp myself since about September of last year, and overall it's been a massive help for me. From dealing with some social anxieties I have to any work anxiety or decision paralysis I've been dealing with over the last 6 months. So glad I'm back in it, as I believe therapy can be a massive help for anyone who's struggling. The biggest barrier of entry is always finding a therapist, but BetterHelp makes it easy for anyone to find a therapist because it's all remote, meaning it's affordable and accessible. All you have to do to get started is fill out a few questions, and BetterHelp matches you with a therapist who is best suited to your needs in as little as a few days. Want to switch therapists? No problem, you aren't locked into anyone, and it doesn't cost you a thing to change therapists on BetterHelp. So it's super easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description for you, betterhelp.com/RabonaTV. And clicking that link gets you 10% off of your first month of BetterHelp. So if you are struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp by going to betterhelp.com/RabonaTV, connect with a therapist, and see if it helps you. Thanks again, BetterHelp, for supporting Rabona TV and making this video possible. Let's start with two sides that have shared some incredible matches over the years. Of course, the first that comes to mind is the remontada from the 2016-17 season, the match that Barcelona won 6-1 over PSG to turn around the 4-0 loss at the Parc des Princes that came in the first leg. Overall, these two sides have faced each other 13 times, with Barcelona winning 5, losing 4, and drawing 4. However, the last time they met was in the 2020-21 round of 16, of which PSG won fairly comfortably against Barcelona, 5-2 on aggregate after a big 4-1 win in Barcelona. Remember that match? Mbappe with a hat-trick at the Camp Nou? If he ends up going to Real Madrid as expected, then he will have far more opportunities to recreate that magic. Now, how did these two get here? Barcelona took on a, let's call them broken Napoli side, a side that doesn't work anymore and are on their 4th manager in a year after being so good under Spalletti last season. They are very dysfunctional, but to their credit, Barcelona did look strong when it came to their attack, and I like how Xavi structured it, with Fermin making those overlapping runs and Rafinha playing in the left half space. Defensively, they did well to lock out Victor Osimhen, including the performances of the 17-year-old kid, Pau Cubarsí. He earned the man of the match in his UCL debut against Napoli, and also earned himself a call-up to the Spanish national team already. That Barcelona pipeline, huh? As for PSG, they took on Real Sociedad, and it was quite comfortable for them, winning 4-1 on aggregate. Now, not to take away from their achievement, of course, but some important context is needed, just like we added for Napoli, right? This Real Sociedad side was not the one from the first 3 or 4 months of the season, when they had the best defense in the competition and were perhaps capable of pulling off an upset against PSG at that time. No, they fell into some rough form, and in 10 matches had 1 win, 3 draws, and 6 losses up until that second leg against PSG. That said, you have to commend PSG for how clinical they were at times against Real Sociedad. Mbappe, who scored 3 of their 4 goals against Real Sociedad, showed predatory instinct in the first leg, and in the second, showed off what makes him a world beater with the 2 goals he scored. Barcola had flashes of brilliance, still need to see a bit more from Ousmane Dembele in my opinion when it comes to finishing, but with 12 assists on the season, I mean, I can't fault him too much, can I? Defensively, I also like what I'm seeing from Lucas Beraldo, filling in well for Skriniar, Kimpembe, and Marquinhos, who are all out injured. Marquinhos could be back in time for Barcelona. Skriniar is up in the air, but he is back in training now. Kimpembe is out for the season, likely, so it could be Beraldo and Danilo, or perhaps Marquinhos or Skriniar will be there. What I like about these two teams being drawn against each other is that it feels incredibly balanced in comparison to years gone by. Each side has a much younger squad than years gone by for the most part, a little bit forced upon them, and in some cases genuine efforts to make the squad younger. Each side is perhaps not as glitzy and glamorous as perhaps they once were. They aren't playing at peak performance, and for all these reasons, I think it will be a great matchup. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Mbappe does flying down that left, as Jules Koundé and Araujo have improved a lot lately. If this was around January, then I would fear for Barcelona due to them and how poorly they were playing. They would get cooked by Mbappe alone. And that's still a possibility because we are talking about a player who is close to the best in the world at the moment. There's something very interesting about this PSG side, part of that being that Kylian Mbappe is in incredible form at the moment. I do have some worries for PSG at the back, which could be taken care of if Marquinhos returns in time to face Barcelona. But I absolutely believe that PSG's attack is potent enough that they will cause Barcelona's backline some major issues. I mean, again, did you see those goals Mbappe scored against Montpellier recently? Incredible. Maybe he'll be Barcelona's doom once again? Sure, let's go with that. But all that being said, it's the tightest margins. Barcelona are looking better and better, and they did their customary beating of Atletico Madrid recently. I do wonder how much of that we can read into, given Atletico have been a bit strange. I guess we'll find out. Let's wait and see. Another iconic matchup from the last decade or so of Champions League football. Iconic but feared if you're an Arsenal supporter.
And it's Arsenal. Kai Havertz, my friend, I am waiting for you.
Good old Thomas Muller, even though he isn't saying anything overly threatening, you know he was always going to pipe up on social media when it was known that they were playing Arsenal, given the historic bottom spankings that Bayern have given Arsenal over the last few years. The last time these two met, Arsenal 2, Bayern 10 on aggregate. In all, in the 12 matches they have played against each other, Bayern have won 7, drawn 2, and Arsenal have won just 3. On top of that, you have the storyline of Harry Kane coming back to North London, and he'll of course need no further motivation to get some goals against Arsenal beyond the fact that he is playing his sworn enemy of so many seasons, and it's the Champions League quarterfinals, of course. Now, each side had one leg in the round of 16 in which they looked wholly uninspired and incredibly disappointing. For Bayern, that came in the first leg loss to Lazio, the team who is currently in 9th in Serie A, while Arsenal offered absolutely nothing in their first leg loss against FC Porto. Now, what's important is how they reacted. And in Bayern's case, they came to life in the second leg and won comfortably with a score of 3-0, as you would expect against a Lazio side who have been terrible, so bad in fact that Maurizio Sarri actually resigned not long after that match. Arsenal, they won their second leg but had to go to a shootout to settle the tie. It would be tempting for someone who doesn't watch Porto often to just say, LOL, Arsenal had to go to a shootout to beat Porto, they must suck, ha ha ha. But that's not really the case. Conceição did what he does best: nullify his opponents the Portuguese way, and he did so excellently against Arsenal, sitting deep enough to make life a nightmare for Arsenal's attackers, but transitioning lightning quick so that Arsenal couldn't commit too many men forward. Like I said in a video a few weeks ago, it was an oil and water situation for Arteta up against Conceição, and I truly believe against a team that plays a more open game, Arsenal would have won more comfortably. What makes this matchup so interesting is that if you were to ignore history, if you were to take that completely out of the equation and simply look at these two sides based on how they have played this season, then Arsenal have been the better team. And you would give them the advantage fairly easily, I think. Again, based on how things have gone this season alone, in which I've made not one, but 2 separate What's Wrong with Bayern videos. For all of the positives, such as Harry Kane, it has been an incredibly frustrating season for Bayern supporters. But history does seem to play a role in football, doesn't it? And that's what makes this one so difficult to call. I believe that Arteta could get the better of Tuchel if you remove the history between the clubs. In fact, in head-to-head, Arteta's Arsenal versus Tuchel's Chelsea, Arteta has 2 wins and a loss. With Arsenal further improving in that time, it does feel a little bit like advantage Arsenal, but it gets difficult with Bayern finding some goals. Granted, they found goals in the Bundesliga against sides that have 19 points from 26 matches and 13 points from 26 matches. Not exactly Titans, but it's form all the same. And of course, they do have history on their side. This is a tough one. This one is very, very difficult for me. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, you know? I'll go for the fun narrative of Arsenal breaking their Bayern hoodoo and moving on to the semifinals, because why not? I mean, who cares? It's a guess anyways. I have a lot more fun with the setup than the actual prediction itself. Back on the other side of the bracket, as Atletico Madrid and Borussia Dortmund will face off, and I think it's safe to say that both sides will have been pretty happy about getting drawn against each other because they both have hope, don't they? Borussia Dortmund will have been happy about their previous draw as well, as they were drawn against the team everyone probably wanted other than Copenhagen and Lazio, PSV. Not a team to be slept on given their domestic unbeaten form so far this season in the Eredivisie, but Borussia Dortmund still managed to overcome them. Man, Luuk de Jong must still be ruining that miss in the 94th minute to send it to extra time. Oof. Meanwhile, Atletico Madrid probably had one of the more difficult draws in the round of 16 as they took on Inter Milan, a team who, for all of their brilliance this season, are making a habit of not being able to compete both in Europe and in Serie A at the same time, as pointed out by Nima Rutsari on Twitter. And he's right, last season they finished third, but made the Champions League final. This season, they are looking great domestically, but couldn't overcome Atleti in the Champions League. Now, Atleti did make it very difficult for Inter, as they probably could have booted them out of the competition before going to extra time and then a shootout, as Riquelme and Depay to a lesser degree both had chances. Riquelme's miss being the more egregious of the two. He killed Simeone, remember? But all's well that ends well, with Atleti going through via the shootout, something you don't get to say about Atleti too often, eh? Simeone didn't even watch the shootout for that reason. Now, Dortmund have been up and down this season. They're fourth in the Bundesliga at this moment, behind Stuttgart, but they have won 4 consecutive matches. Atleti, their domestic form is just so bonkers, man. They are the weirdest team. They are not consistent, but that's what makes them fun to watch, I guess. They're uniquely Atleti. They come off of that great high of knocking out Inter at the Metropolitano, where it was a bubbling cauldron in that match, only to absolutely stink out their own stadium and supporters with that limp performance, losing 3-0 against Barcelona at home. What I do like about Borussia Dortmund in this moment is that in spite of everything, in spite of Terzic perhaps not playing the most expansive and entertaining football that we have seen from previous iterations of Borussia Dortmund, their leaders in the squad, their important fellas, are stepping up when asked to. Recently, they went down at home against Frankfurt, only to rally and win 3-1. Hummels with another great performance for them in that match, defensively of course, but also grabbing a goal, which is a nice bonus for the big man. Now, Borussia Dortmund do get the benefit of playing the second leg at home, but I believe that Simeone will go full terrorism and after taking a slight lead in the first leg, will hold on for a draw in the second away, taking Atletico through. We're talking ugly draw in that second leg. Simeone and this Atleti team are built for tournament ball, but I don't see them in the final. Semis as far as they will go. Unless PSG wins, then they have a chance. Against Barcelona, I mean, you know what happens when Atleti faces Barcelona, right? And finally, as mentioned, we have our annual Manchester City versus Real Madrid meetup. They haven't met in the final before. In fact, in the previous 2 editions of this tournament, they have met in the semi-final. The team who won the semi-final between them ended up winning the final as well. Is that the same for the quarterfinals? We'll see. Real Madrid, of course, took it in 2022 with that insane Rodrigo finish to the match against Manchester City and then winning in the final. And City took it last season very comfortably against Real Madrid in the semi-final and then beating Inter. Speaking of comfort, there wasn't much for Real Madrid in their latest round of 16 matchup against RB Leipzig, of which they won 2-1. If Leipzig were just a tiny bit better, if they had just a tiny bit more quality in the attack, bit more composure, we could be talking about Manchester City versus RB Leipzig for the 1 millionth time of late. As far as my boredom goes, thanks goodness for that, because those 2 teams need to get restraining orders against each other. It's too much, UEFA. Too much Leipzig versus City. Manchester City, speaking of which, were of course quite comfortable with their last 16 matchup as they overcame Copenhagen 3-1, so 6-2 on aggregate. The defending champions got the easiest draw you could ask for. I mean, all credit to Copenhagen though, who do play some nice football, don't they? They just are severely underpowered compared to the big budgeted European teams. Right now, this Manchester City side doesn't seem to be at the very, very top of their game. My thought on this is, and I'm loath to blame the dude, given he still has scored 29 goals in 34 matches, but Erling Haaland is missing a lot more opportunities this season compared to last. And I wonder if that slight difference where he's underperforming his XG this season, is ultimately what makes Man City seem ever so slightly less potent than they were at this point last season. Haaland just not being as unbelievable as he was last season. By the way, isn't it funny how quickly we take things for granted? Haaland with 29 goals and 6 assists from 34 appearances, and I point to him as the potential problem for City. He's unbelievable still, but again, it's not that he's the problem, as if they are bad right now or something. I'm just trying to figure out why they aren't flying as high as they were at this point last season. Well, for one, you aren't going to always be better than the previous season, and two, he's not the only problem, in air quotes. Manchester City's defense has had some strange things happen recently. They found clean sheets harder to come by, and when it comes to their league play in particular, since that's the largest body of data we have, their expected goals against after just 28 of 38 matches is at 27.6 already, and has almost reached that of their 2022-23 total of 32.1. So they're giving up a lot more opportunities per match. While Man City isn't tip-top, they also haven't lost since October 12th. They're on a 22-match unbeaten run, so I'm really trying hard to find some gaps in their armor for you guys, you know? As for Real Madrid, they aren't on their best run of form at the moment. They ran into a few more draws than they would have liked in the beginning of March, but overall, they also have a great unbeaten run of 12 matches. In fact, they have only lost twice on the entire season, and one of those was in extra time of the Copa del Rey against their bogey team in their bogey stadium this season, Atletico Madrid at the Metropolitano. The 2 times they've lost this season have been at the Metropolitano, which is pretty impressive from Atleti. When you look at the entirety of the Real Madrid season, despite the great results, when we look at them playing at peak performance, there have been peaks, pun intended, and valleys. As certain players have gone out of form in the attack, it's felt like they haven't all been firing at the same time, you know? One is up, the other's down, and then they switch kind of thing. But that's the thing, is that Real Madrid has such special players, just as Man City does, that they don't need all of them to be firing in order for them to bury teams. Both sides have this quality, exceptional talents that can turn the tide of matches with a single play. For example, Vinicius is playing some insane football at the moment, 6 goals in his last 4 matches. And what's great for Ancelotti is that he has guys like Militão, whom he said may be back in mid-April for the first leg. It's up in the air, but they are training with the team and things are looking promising. That is a massive boost for Carleto, as the backline has been one of the big areas where it felt like you would take some names, put them in a hat, shake them up, and then pour them out and see what you get. Now he has Rudiger, so Carvajal can play as a right back and not a center back again. Ferland Mendy as an option at the back again. You know, people playing where they should, except Tchouaméni, but he's actually turned out to be a fantastic center back, so hey, that's fine. Speaking of throwing names into a hat and seeing what you get, that's how I feel about this one. What worries me if I'm a Manchester City supporter is how the defense has been performing recently. Look to the match against Liverpool at Anfield, which they probably should have lost, and they looked shaken up. But Real in general looked really poor against Leipzig, even getting whistled off of the pitch at halftime at the Bernabeu. Show up like that again and City will smash them like they did last season. I don't think they will smash Real Madrid, but I will go with City just edging Real. And these were hard picks to make in this one, eh? My God, everything is so close, but we got through it. Be sure to let me know your picks for the quarterfinals, but beyond that, thank you for watching with me, and I'll see you soon. Take care.